Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of All Things College and Career. We're so glad to have you back and listening with us. Today we have a great guest, Charlie Bergman, the Director of Personal and Professional Development at St. John's College, which is a private liberal arts college with 2 campuses in Annapolis, Maryland, and Santa Fe, New Mexico. And it's the 3rd oldest college in the country.
Yes, Charlie was an amazing guest with such a radio voice. You're going to love his voice.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
But St. John's is often considered very unique. The program explores 3,000 years of human thought and discovery across 7 disciplines in the chronological order that the discoveries occurred. It has less than 900 students across both campuses. It requires that all students study the same thing in the same order and only offers 1 undergraduate degree, and that degree is a Bachelor of Arts in Liberal Arts.
Yes, and don't be quick to judge that curriculum because they turn out some amazing students. Their alumni have gone on to work in machine learning and AI at Google and Facebook, in climate change for the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and as aerospace engineers at NASA. They've found renowned art collective, Meow Wolf, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Ninio, which is the award-winning online trading platform for farmers in East Africa. They've become award-winning winemakers, artists and furniture designers, novelists, lawyers and judges, and scientists and researchers, and have been the recipient of a Fulbright National Geographic Storytelling Fellow. Wow, that's an impressive list. I'm wiped out.
That's a mouthful. Yes. But that is enough of our introduction. But if you want to hear more about this great little college, tune in.
Yeah.
Listen up.
Listen up, people.
There you go. And on to our interview with Charlie Bergman.
Okay, let's do it.
Hello, Charlie Bergman. Welcome to All Things College and Career. Thanks so much for doing our podcast today.
Well, thank you, Bobby and Meg. It's a pleasure to be online with you.
Well, Charlie, you have a great voice for this. I have to say that right off the bat.
Absolutely.
You sound great.
Yes.
We are thrilled to have you on the podcast today, and we appreciate you taking the time to join us. We're going to get right to it. We always start our podcast by asking our guests 3 things they love about their career. So could you tell us 3 things you love about working at St. John's College?
Well, that is easy. The first thing that I love about St. John's College is working with young adults.
Yeah.
Nothing gives you a greater sense of optimism, a sense of promise, a sense of tremendous possibility in the future than dealing with young people who are so full of energy, so full of enthusiasm for the subjects they're studying, their visions of their own future, that, you know, those of us in our business, we may inevitably age because that's something we haven't learned to stop in our bodies and our muscles and our joints.
Darn
but when you have a job like mine, it keeps you young. And that's what's wonderful. That's the first thing. The second thing is I am very much a product of the liberal arts education in countless ways. And if I were to list on a short list the things that have most affected my life and for which I'm most grateful, I would have to say that my education has been essentially entirely informed by the liberal arts approach. And very few colleges do liberal arts in as pure a form as St. John's College does. So it's a real privilege to be here and in a sense give back to this institution something of what has been so generously given me. And then I would say the other thing I love about my job is my colleagues here. They share a conviction that what happens at this college is important. The tutors, that's our word for professors,
Yes, I love that.
Consummate professionals. Their knowledge of the works we teach is incredible. And so as I do my work with my team here in our office, I also have a chance to speak regularly with the faculty, and they're just an incredible group of professionals.
Yeah, those are great things. I have to say, I'm a little envious of you being surrounded by that youth all the time. I have 2 college sons, and so when they're around, I'm inspired by their energy and their possibilities for the future. But I envious of you being around it all the time. That's got to be very enriching.
It is indeed.
Yes, I'm sure.
That's so true. So let's dive right in. As we mentioned, St. John's College is an exclusively liberal arts college. So what are the benefits, in your opinion, of receiving an exclusively liberal arts education?
So, first of all, thank you for giving me a bit of a heads up that this was going to be the central question. It's something, obviously, that we think a lot about here. Mm-hmm. And what I'd like to do is offer you 3 different takes, different kinds of answers to that question. And you can perhaps tell me where you'd like me to start. I can be very succinct on any of them or more expansive on others. But I would say the first, and in many ways, when we consider human life in its entirety, and most important benefit of a liberal arts education is that it can immeasurably enrich a life. And if you believe, as I do, that life is a gift, a natural question is how can we make the most of it? So that's one kind of an answer. The second kind of an answer is it is essential for participation as an active and informed citizen in democratic life. And one of the privileges of living in America as an American citizen is that we live in a democracy, which confers great benefits, but also there are tremendous responsibilities. And in my opinion, nothing prepares a person for active citizenship better than a liberal arts education. And then the third, which may be where you want to start, I'll follow your lead on this, is I think it's an unbeatable preparation for a fulfilling and a happy professional career.
Okay, all 3 of those are essential in my opinion. I wouldn't know where to start on that. So to recap, the 3 were for enriching your life, for participation in democracy, and for preparation for a fulfilling and happy career. Wow, so all 3 of those are topics that I think our listeners could benefit from. However, I'm thinking the last one is probably the most beneficial. What do you think, Meg?
Well, what was coming to my mind is my take on a liberal arts education is it helps students to think critically, defend their ideas, and to write well, basically. So I think those can be the foundation to grow in any number of areas. But as you said, it's a good foundation for participating in democracy and many other things. So
that's a good cue. So why don't I start and just embellish a little bit on the third of the list, which is the foundation for a happy and fulfilling career. Would that make sense?
Sure. It's a great place to start.
Good. We can start. And of course, I understand that many in your audience might very well be worried about that. And we, of course, know very well the tremendous challenge of all liberal arts colleges where these are not inexpensive places. And I think parents and students are right to ask this very practical question. So here is my answer. It begins with an objective study, and there are many like it, but this particular one is the 2019 Job Outlook from the National Association of Colleges and Employers, NACE, where they regularly ask employers what are the top skills that you're looking for in employees that they want to bring in and then, and this is important, grow and ideally, in the best case, keep throughout an entire career lifespan. And that's important because that means there's an entry to the career, there's a mid-career, and then there's, of course, an end to the career or a final third, which may very well involve leadership of the organization at the top level. And the answer to that question from 2019 is 3 things. Top of the list is clear communication, writing and speaking. Second is creative problem solving. And third is productive teamwork. Now, again, that's not my opinion. That's from a well-respected survey of employers. So you look at the first one, clear communication, writing, and speaking. Nobody exercises writing as well as a liberal arts college. Throughout the natural sciences, the social sciences, the humanities, and the arts, you will find the essay in short or long form as a deeply embedded form of exercising the mind. And out of those essays, through just practice, lots of practice, comes tremendously skilled writers. And at the same time, another core form of engagement for liberal arts college is the seminar. And what happens in seminars? Well, you have to engage with ideas and speak and defend and articulate clearly. So when it comes to developing the communication skills, liberal arts are a perfect environment for doing that. Next is creative problem solving. Well, in our version, which I sometimes smile and say is the pure play form of liberal arts, and we can talk a little bit about that later, but as you know, the curriculum here is based on the great books. We do not use textbooks. We only use original texts.
Right.
And this is true for many liberal arts colleges where they may not exclusively go to the great books, but they do so regularly. So what does that mean? Well, it means that each text is a brand new, very difficult problem. For example, the first time you engage with Homer's Iliad, this is not easy going.
No.
You are in a different world. You're seeing these characters. And so you have to solve the problem of what the text is saying, form an opinion about it, then be able to defend your opinion, and then write persuasively about it. So that's creative problem solving. And then the third highly skill and high demand from this survey was productive teamwork. And I see this frequently here because another form of liberal arts instruction, as I said, is the seminar. What happens in a seminar? Well, you have to listen carefully. You have to respect and understand your fellow students' opinions. You have to work together to incorporate those thoughts and opinions into your own thinking and create a synthesis. Well, when you do that, you're doing exactly what happens on good and productive teams in organizations as a professional. So it's very clear that it's an unrivaled way to meet the top demands of employers today.
Yeah, it's really hard to argue with that logic. It really is.
Absolutely.
And that productive teamwork, I feel like that is something that needs a lot of emphasis these days. We could use a lot more of listening, sharing ideas, and respecting opinions and so forth. So, yes.
For sure.
So you touched upon the St. John's curriculum by mentioning the great books. Can you tell us a little bit more about the curriculum, how the students go through their 4 years? I know from our reading and research that you have basically they all share the same curriculum and there's one major. So could you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. So you're absolutely correct. We have a set curriculum. There are no majors. And so what we say is that we offer a bachelor's of arts in the liberal arts. And what's really important here is that we use the term liberal arts in the classical sense. And that term goes way back to its first use, we think, was by the Roman statesman Cicero, when he was talking about all of the skills necessary for the informed free citizen to participate fully in the life of the republic. And so the liberal arts here encompass the natural sciences, the social sciences, the humanities, and the arts. So that translates, in fact, to a curriculum that, if you take it down a step, is foreign language in the form of Greek and French, history, politics, law, economics, literature, math, natural science, music, visual art, philosophy, theology, and psychology. So it is truly the broadest possible exposure to the Western tradition. The way that is done, as I mentioned before, is we do not use textbooks. Everything is an original text. These numbers vary slightly, but if we count authors of these original works, which may be authors of essays, longer works, or 1,000-page novels, freshmen encounter about 32 authors, sophomores about 35, juniors about 38, and seniors around 60.
Whoa.
So what does that mean? That means in a 4-year experience, you can sort of imagine an XY graph here. You're surveying the entire span across all of the intellectual disciplines, and you're doing it with direct engagement with 165 authors.
Yeah. Wow, that's a big jump that senior year, huh?
Yeah, and I should be a fair disclosure here.
Yeah.
The big jump in the senior year is a product of the fact that a good number of the authors are much shorter essays that come a little later in the year.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I was wondering that. Yeah, in reviewing the curriculum, it looked enticing to me. I would love to read all 165 of those.
Yeah, me too, and get into discussions with the thinking group of people. That would be so much fun.
Right. Actually, our mom belonged to the great books, and
she did.
I think she pretty much read most of them. But that aside, in doing our research, we've read that people have been pretty critical of the lack of representation of people of color and women represented in your curriculum. So what do you have to say about that?
This is a very difficult question, and it stems from the fact that if you begin with a curricular design that says we are going to explicitly look to the classical canon of the Western tradition, we have what is for us moderns today an uncomfortable fact, an uncomfortable reality, which is that the great bulk of the authors whose works had been transmitted to us today as that canon have been European, white, and mostly male.
Right.
So where we have a difficulty is if we say this is what the education is and how we're going to build our curriculum based on these works, we have to remain true to that commitment, or we change the design of the curriculum. That said, the faculty is always looking for works that come from a broader set of authors, different gender, different cultures, that might well count or be acceptable as considered classics. One fact is that in the West, women have only become much more participative in the professions fairly recently. So what that means is there's no shortage of works, very good works coming from female authors. But the question for the college here is, at what point do we perhaps get a little ahead of ourselves and say this work, fairly modern compared to, say, the Greeks or the medieval authors, we are going to anoint as a classic? You can see that's a little bit of a delicate question.
Yeah.
So it's a real balancing act, and we certainly understand why some students may say there's a problem here. And I think what we have to say is that we're absolutely appreciate that perspective, but until the college decides that it's going to change its fundamental principle for where it sources its work, this is going to be an artifact that we're going to have to live with.
Who deems these classic? Like, why were not works of people of color and women considered classics?
I think that's because largely one of the features of a classic, of the classical canon, is just a matter of time. In other words, in order to be able to consider a work a classic work, you have to allow multiple generations. And that really is on the order of at least a century or more, really, if you start thinking about what scholarship needs to do, what multiple critical cohorts of scholars bring to bear on the worth of an author and an author's ideas, be it in literature or in sociology or in philosophy. It takes time. And what we do know is that what can appear today to be something incredibly important and enduring really doesn't pass the test of time, because, we are all victims of presentism. We feel naturally that what we see today in the news around us is urgent and important and overwhelming, but it isn't always the case that what is urgent today stands that test of time. So that's a structural problem when we move the clock back to the point where we can say on the timeline, we can legitimately deem a work a classic. Then the authorship question narrows.
Yeah. The other thing that came to my mind while we were discussing this is that my guess is, even though they're studying a classic written by a white European man, that today's students don't necessarily agree with the topics and are translating it into current discussions, bringing in color, bringing in women, and not just settling on the viewpoint of the white European that wrote the book originally. So I'm guessing there's a lot of conversation that makes it rounder, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. And what we love about this community, we're a very small community, is that, one of the things we say here is that we don't use the word professor.
Right.
Because our scholars, who are our faculty, do not profess really ever in the classroom. Occasionally, like for example today, we'll have a lecture, but we call them tutors because we believe that the Socratic method, which is the method that we use here in the seminar format, there are no lectures. In that mode, in that pedagogical mode, the book and the author are the teachers.
Right.
And the tutor is simply there to make sure that the conversation flows. And so this is the power of the methodology, which is that it becomes an authentic, unmediated engagement by each student in the seminar, first with the text and then with the reactions, the ideas, the commentary of their fellow students. And that's in the context of the work in the seminar. But just as you suggest, outside the seminar, the conversation continues.
Yeah.
And the ideas that have been elucidated and uncovered in the works are recapitulated, they're discussed, they're argued from multiple points of view, including the validity of the ideas
Yeah.
for today.
Sure. Yeah, that's
Right.
what I
Makes
can
sense.
imagine. It does make sense. So you have now 2 campuses, or have had for a bit now. One in Annapolis, which is the capital of Maryland, and one in Santa Fe, which is the capital of New Mexico. Can you share with us the similarities and differences between the 2 campuses?
Yes. The first most important thing is to note that the curriculum is identical in each place.
Okay.
And that's, again, I think important to know, going back to several questions you've already asked, that St. John's College is a college committed to a very clear idea. And it continues to have tremendous faith, as do I, that this idea is a profoundly powerful form of education. And so the reason you see the same curriculum on both campuses reflects that conviction that the program here, and we call it the program, capital T, capital P,
Right, yes.
is really a very fine form of education. By the way, what that means is that students can transfer from campus to campus very easily because there's no articulation
Yeah, I love that.
bump. You ask a good question, the difference. I would say that the biggest difference is simply the physical environment.
Right.
And what's true about a residential college experience, especially where communities are small, is that so much of one's experience is influenced by the place you're in.
Mm-hmm.
Annapolis is green, it's leafy, it's close to the much bigger cities that are its neighbors.
Right.
It has a feeling of proximity to some of the oldest and most important population and professional centers of the United States. And for that reason, it has a wonderful feel that would be akin to what you would feel at other small liberal arts colleges like, say, Amherst or Williams in the feel on campus.
Right.
Out here in Santa Fe, we are in really I feel, and I'm smiling here because I'm a fan, the best of the West, which is the authentic Southwest.
Right.
Right now, I'm looking out my window. We had a cold snow last night, and in my own humble opinion, a snowfall in our local mountains, the Sangre de Cristo Mountains in Santa Fe, is just about the prettiest kind of winter you can ever see. We're at about 7,000 feet. We're in the Rocky Mountain spine. The air is clear, and we are in one of the least populous states in the entire union. If I take 2 steps from my office, my sight line goes southwest about 85 miles with nothing but open, beautiful high desert. So
Wow.
I think what that means is that students who want the program but want a very different environment where skiing, rock climbing, kayaking, hikes, the 4 seasons of the high mountain west are part of the experience, they have a choice.
Yeah. That's a great choice because they're so completely different. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the contrast. They both sound amazing.
Yeah.
This is on a completely different subject. What's the weather like in Santa Fe? You mentioned snow, but I'm assuming it's warm still, or?
Well, so this is interesting. Many people who don't know the Southwest naturally think that we're a lot like Phoenix. And that's because Phoenix is a bigger metropolitan area, and it's a lovely place to live. But Phoenix really has 2 market seasons, the winter, which is glorious, and then 4 or more months of really a pretty hot summer.
Yeah.
Season. And the difference between New Mexico, even though we're roughly the same latitude as Phoenix, is that the biggest city right down the road from us, Albuquerque, is at about 5,500 feet. And where I am now is about 7,000 feet. So we're high on the Colorado Plateau, and that makes all the difference. We have 4 distinct seasons.
Yeah.
Summers in Santa Fe are warm during the middle of the day. Mornings and afternoons are glorious. Even on a hot summer day, it cools very quickly at night. The fall has as much color of its own kind as does the East Coast. Fall in New Mexico is an extraordinarily beautiful time. Winters are clear and crisp, cold with snowfall. The big difference is you have, for example, that lake effect in the Northeast where it's raw, sort of bone-chilling and gray. When our cold comes, you just want to get out and run around, and you don't feel the bite. It's dry, and our powder snow is just the lightest snow anywhere on Earth.
Sounds awesome.
And then the spring is nice. It's we have fruit trees that bud. We have flowers. can get a little breezy from time to time. So I think the biggest difference is we have 4 distinct seasons the way the East Coast does, but they're high mountain seasons, and for that reason are a little different.
Sounds beautiful.
It does sound beautiful.
Makes me want to visit.
Me too.
I noted that St. John's only has 3 intercollegiate sports, and one of them is croquet. So I was wondering
croquet.
if
I love it.
I know. I was wondering if athletes find a home at St. John's, and what are the 3 sports that you have besides croquet?
We have no competitive sports here in Santa Fe. The 3 sports, and there are only 3, I'm pretty sure, are all at Annapolis. Croquet, you're right. I think it may actually be crew. It may be rowing is the second one.
I think so. Yep.
And I don't remember the third.
Well, I have to bring up a quote I was reading. I forget where I read it, but it was a quote from a naval midshipman, which is, I guess, in croquet, the big competition is against Annapolis, the academy.
Yeah.
And so one of the naval midshipmen said, they're out practicing croquet every afternoon. Alabama should take football this seriously.
That's pretty funny.
I thought that was hysterical.
Yeah, that's great.
And that's, I can't resist. That is, we call our students here and our grads Johnnies.
Right.
And you asked me at the opening of the interview a wonderful question about what I love about this college. I gave you 3 of the top reasons. The 4th would be, and you've already pointed this out, this is a very unusual and very pure version of the liberal arts. And because it is unusual, it attracts unusual students. They're wonderful. And they are wonderfully quirky sometimes. And so croquet, as something you take seriously, is so much St. John's College. I love it.
That is. It's great. It's great. I can just envision it.
That is great.
So what is the student life like at St. John's? I mean, we touched about academics. We touched a little bit on the sports. I assume you probably have some rec sports, some non-competitive sports that the students play.
We do.
Yeah. So can you just touch upon, outside of the academics, what the student life is like?
Yeah. So the students here, we do have a very fine recreational sports and activities program. So students can be involved with archery, a whole range of other activities at our, we have some beautiful playing fields, a very, very well-equipped gym. And then the outdoor ed program is just unrivaled. And of course, that goes back to a very distinct difference between us and Annapolis, which is that we're right up against the base of the Rocky Mountain spine, the Sangre de Cristos here. And so half an hour, 45 an hour's drive away is some of the best backpacking anywhere in the American West. Skiing, hiking, literally our dorms were on a little bit of a hill. One of the remarkable things that visitors see when they come here is the back door of many of our dorms on the upper side of campus is literally 1 yard away from the most beautiful hiking trails you've ever seen. So the wilderness and the hiking opportunities are literally at your back door. So outdoors is a big, big part of who we are because it's so beautiful here. There are also a wide variety of student activities. We have a very active literary magazine called The Moon. We have various language clubs. We have a Latin language club. One of the formal courses here or subjects is ancient Greek because the students themselves will have often come from a classical high school or middle school experience. We have Latin. We have studio art, sculpture. And then there's also some very fine music here. We've got a chamber orchestra. And then I myself sing in one of 2 quite serious singing groups. One is called Schola Cantorum, and that's a mixed men and women group of I think we're about 15, 16 now, and we sing music across the ages, some modern, some classical, 4-part harmony, and then there's a smaller group that does a little more challenging work. So there is a wide variety of activities, both intellectual and outdoors for our students here.
It sounds fabulous. So I am not surprised at all to learn that you are a singer based on your voice.
Yeah.
I have to say.
Right.
But Maggie and I would probably like to come right out right now and do that hiking you're talking about out behind the campus. So.
We definitely would.
If we could, we would.
Let's put it on the list. So what would you say about the selectivity of St. John's College? Is admissions selective? And what is admissions looking for in a candidate that applies?
So I think the best way to answer that is to say that our admissions is selective because what we feel is our responsibility is to let anyone who inquires about the college to know exactly what the program is or is not. And that's important because parents and students certainly can't be faulted for starting with an attractive idea, which may be liberal arts, and not knowing that in the liberal arts community, there are actually quite a variety of the ways in which liberal arts colleges construct their program. And so the way in which we're selective is we want to be sure that every student and every family knows what the program is. And again, it's remarkable. There are no textbooks. Everything used here is an original text. What does that mean? Well, it can be challenging. I mean, reading, for example, the works of Copernicus in the original, or our students, our seniors, read Einstein's original paper on relativity in the original. If you like a textbook which has sort of reworded things in a little more approachable form, then maybe St. John's is not the best match for you. On the other hand, if the idea of reading the original works is attractive, which it certainly is for me, it's a great place. There are no tests at all. All evaluation is done through writing. And what's remarkable about that is there are a minimum of about 58 essays, 58 substantial essays that students will write in the course of their 4 years.
Yeah.
And of course, that's what yields this remarkable facility with both speaking and writing and speaking, because they also have to, in their senior year, defend a major paper in an oral, and that you find this very rarely actually now, in an oral defense in front of a panel of tutors. So, and that may not be for everybody. Some people would like maybe some, curriculum based on tests and quizzes and so forth. And then the final thing is our instructional model is tutors don't profess. They facilitate a seminar conversation. And again, for some students, they may want to sit in lectures, large format lectures, small format lectures. And so again, it may not be the best match. So we get our success here, and it's an extraordinary success, when our admissions team is able to articulate clearly all of the important features that make St. John's College distinct, so that a student and his or her parents understand, aha, I got it, and this is for me. And when that match happens, it's magic.
Yeah, that sounds perfect. And I have to also throw in there, while we're talking about admissions, that your college has reduced your tuition, which is admirable, and we applaud that, by quite a substantial amount.
That's right. And this goes to some very creative thinking with our board and our president, Mr. Mark Roosevelt. And I'm going to be sketchy here, but I think I can accurately give you a bit of the background there. Now, several studies showed very clearly that one of the barriers to many, many families who may not be fully versed in what liberal arts colleges mean, what they can do, one of the barriers was the sticker price. And there was an older model, kind of a legacy model of pricing, which said we're going to charge $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, and then have a conversation about your family's ability to pay, and then look for a combination of scholarships, fellowships, and loans to fill in the gap. Mm-hmm. Well, that's a financial reality that reflects the fact that liberal arts education is expensive, mm-hmm. and that there's a widening gap between the cost of the education and families' ability to pay. What was discovered, and this is interesting, is that the sticker price alone was so formidable and so scary that it scared off lots of families, particularly families where college education has not been part of the tradition, that they never even thought to inquire. And that's a shame, because like many liberal arts colleges, St. John's College has quite substantial scholarship resources. Mm-hmm. So what we realized is if the sticker price alone is scaring families away, there's something wrong, because at least what we want to do is invite you to a conversation. First, to check whether this is a good match for you, but then let's talk about the finances.
Right.
And so by lowering the sticker price, you overcome that initial shock, and hopefully families that are interested in continuing say, well, it's beyond reach, but not so badly beyond reach. I think I'll pick up the phone or email and inquire. And of course, once the inquiry begins, in many cases, we can close the gap, and a student now who might not otherwise have come here has the chance for an absolutely wonderful experience.
Yeah, that's fabulous.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes total sense as well. So what percentage of your students expect to get work without going to grad school, or what percentage of your students go on to graduate school?
Okay, good. So two separate questions.
Right.
Yeah, sorry.
They were. No, that's good. No, and they're both very good ones. In reverse, our latest statistics are that about 70% of our undergraduate students go on to grad school.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means is that we're in the top 4% of colleges and universities in the percentage of alumni that go on, in this case, particularly for PhDs in humanities, journalism, business, science, and engineering. So the numbers are high for going on to get a next degree. More and more we see students, and this is not unique to St. John's College, who will not necessarily go immediately on to grad school, but they'll take some time off to experiment with a career direction, maybe travel or have some adventures before they begin a serious professional direction. Your first question was,
are they able to find work right out of college with a liberal arts degree?
Excellent question. And I regret I can't answer the question about percentage that go into full-time employment right after graduation with their BA in liberal arts. I don't have that statistic, but what I can tell you is that there are employment sectors, professional sectors, that very much want our graduates with only a BA because of a unique skill set that matches the employer demand. And I'm speaking now about K through 12 schools, which, like St. John's College, have elected to build their programs around what is sometimes called a classical educational model or a great books model. Interestingly, there is now a growing movement in the United States among private schools and particularly charter schools to return to the classical great books model for education K through 12. That is K through 6, elementary, 7, 8, middle school, and then 9, 10, 11, 12, high school. Because, big surprise, in retrospect, this is a pretty effective way to educate young people, not just for college, but for the 12 years that precedes college. So now the question is, suppose you are a single charter or a consortium of charters. One good example is the Great Hearts Academies, which are based out of Arizona. I think something like 28 or more campuses now, expanding into Texas. As we speak, they're actually recruiting on campus here today.
Wow.
Their problem is, if we have a great books curricular framework, K through 12, who can teach it?
Right.
So what's really, really very gratifying is that, in fact, there is a wonderful way to start right out of the chute with your BA in a worthy and very satisfying career as a K through 12 teaching, ready to go without any really further preparation other than maybe some initial mentoring on classroom management and how to prepare a lesson plan and so forth. So that's an example of how the BA really is a very good match.
So these are private schools, I assume, because they don't need the education degree.
That's right. So exactly right. So the typical, almost universal barrier to the model I just described in a standard public school, state-funded public school, is that you need a teaching license. The charters almost always, as part of the charter arrangement, even though they're publicly funded, is they're given much wider latitude to waive the teaching degree requirement. And so that means then that a charter in most states can simply say, in our opinion, you are qualified in your subject. You haven't taught before. We'll take care of that with a mentoring system, and you're off and running.
Right. So what about research opportunities? I know your undergrads go through labs and things like that, just like a lot of other schools, but is there research opportunities that are available in your graduate program, or possibly that you partner with companies outside of St. John's? Or
we do not have research in the formal academic sense as part of our program, either in the 4 undergraduate years or in the graduate division. And that reflects the fact that in both cases, the model is the great books model, where the experience is the engagement with the texts. That said, we do have a well-developed internship program on both campuses. They're funded differently, but it's a separate pot of money that is set aside for summer internships, where students who are interested in doing research have the opportunity to do that. For example, here at St. John's College in Santa Fe, literally right across the valley, I can see them from my other window, is Los Alamos National Labs. And they're one of the important labs that grew out of the Manhattan Project at the end of World War II. Mm-hmm. They do all kinds of very, very important scientific work. And so our students who are interested in STEM, particularly science and science research, have an opportunity to engage with the professionals at LANL, Los Alamos. Mm-hmm. And they love that, by the way. Los Alamos loves that because they, like most New Mexico institutions, wants very much to capture good talent in state and keep it in state.
Of course, yeah.
And so we will have funded internships over the summer where our students have a very authentic and actually, in many cases, life-changing experience with what cutting-edge scientific research looks like.
Okay, well, that works. I think that's an awesome balance. I love that. So Meg had found a New York Times article by Frank Bruni, and we both read it. But there's one quote in there by Walter Sterling, who's the dean of the Santa Fe campus, or at least he was during the time of this article, where he said, education should prepare you for all of your life. It should make you a more thoughtful, reflective, self-possessed, and authentic citizen, lover, partner, parent, and member of the global economy. And I don't know, I just thought that was a great quote.
Yeah, that is a great quote. That's awesome.
And like Frank Bruni said, he says, I love that assessment, the precision, balance, and sweep of it. And I couldn't have said that better myself, so I just had to use his words.
Yes, that's a wonderful statement of, I think, the broader meaning and value of liberal arts education. And I think that I would only make one comment here. I am profoundly sensitive to what many students and families worry about with good reason, which is education is an increasingly expensive investment. And I'll just put it in very crass terms, what's my ROI?
Yeah.
And I think it's absolutely legitimate to ask ROI in terms of job prospects right after graduation.
Right.
And I think anyone who dismisses that concern, I think, is just being unfair and unrealistic about the realities of education in this country. Mm-hmm. That said, I think that too narrow a question about the value of an education as only ROI in terms of career preparedness is a horrible mistake. Mm-hmm. Because at its best, a liberal arts education can be a great platform for a lifetime career, not just your starting job, but to grow into middle management, and then ultimately where interdisciplinary thinking and flexibility, anticipation of disruption is what you need to be running an organization in a rapidly changing world. But beyond that, being a citizen, being engaged with your world, and I will go one step further, which Dean Sterling talks about. In the end, this life should be a joy. Mm. And what a shame if somehow, for good reasons, you haven't learned the joy of a great novel. Mm-hmm. You've never learned the joy of a string quartet. You've never learned what it is to sing or play an instrument or stargaze or write poetry. I mean, in the end, and this is my belief, the career should enable a rich life. And if you enable a career but lack the perspective and the tools to enjoy a rich life, I think that's a shame. Mm. And that is what, in my opinion, a liberal arts education does better than anything else.
Oh, wow. Said. Very well said. And what a great way to wrap this podcast up.
Yeah.
That was so inspiring, I have to say. I'll be listening to that a few times.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So, Charlie, we like to end our podcast with a quick series of rapid fire questions. It's traditional, so we'll try to get through that. And are you ready?
I don't know what they are, but fire away.
I know you don't, but hey, you're going to find out. Here we go.
Okay.
If you weren't doing what you are doing now, what would you be doing?
Oh, that's easy. I'd be teaching high school.
Oh, okay. Well, you'd be a great high school teacher, but I'm sure they'd hate to lose you at St. John's.
Yeah.
All right.
For sure.
Favorite activity?
My favorite activity is hiking in the mountains right out my back door.
All right. And like I said before, we're a little jealous.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure. Okay. A book you would recommend?
Book I would recommend. I would recommend, this is going to be really nerdy.
That's all right.
I would recommend The Origin of Species.
Okay. See, I haven't read that.
Darwin's Origin of Species.
I did read some of that because we visited the Galapagos. So that was...
Oh, yeah, that's right, Meg. You did read some of that.
Yeah.
The reason I love it is if the measure, we talked about this a moment ago, of a classic is a work that completely changes some of the deepest held, longest running, but totally wrong understandings of the universe. It's hard to beat that book. Because it's that work that says there's this wonderful, marvelous, amazing natural phenomenon of evolution that explains the wonders of the natural world. And before that, there were different explanations, and they didn't sound like that.
Yeah, it was definitely groundbreaking.
Well, I definitely need to get on that. Maybe for inspiration, I need to go to the Galapagos too, Meg.
Absolutely.
Most valuable class you have taken?
Wow, what a great question, most valuable class. Can I ask this? Will be when you say valuable, mean useful for me in my career, or just how I perceive value?
You can qualify it whatever way you want. When you answer it, just say, well, valuable in the sense of, you can say.
Okay, the most valuable, and I would say valuable as influential class I ever took was a brilliant class in physical chemistry when I was a sophomore, and the topic was thermodynamics. And it was there that I first realized how extraordinary this feature of our intellect, this thing that humans are able to do, which is natural law. We can look at the natural world and we can deduce laws about the way nature behaves, and those laws are compact and they're so powerful. It's just an amazing tribute to the human intellect. And for me, the laws of thermodynamics are pretty much at the top of the list.
Wow, that was a great answer.
Very profound.
Yes, very profound. Well, hey, those laws of thermodynamics have helped us immeasurably. So there you go. Okay, first job.
My first job was working as a marketing representative. That was a sales rep for IBM Corporation's mainframe division in Santa Barbara, California. And that was in 1980. I was a commissioned salesman selling what were called mainframes. And that was the word in those days for really big computers that only big companies could buy. And that led me to do the same thing with IBM for 4.5 wonderful years in China.
Wow. What an experience. Did you pick up the language while you were over there?
I did. IBM needed a group of young, single Chinese speakers to go to Beijing to begin the IBM subsidiary there back in the mid-'80s. And I had the great good fortune to be tapped to be part of that team.
Wow, so cool.
I love amazing. That. Yeah. What an experience.
Woo. All right. Are you a good cook?
You want to know what? That is a soft pitch, and I wish my wife were here to tell you that I'm not lying. I am a great cook.
Oh, wow. He sings, he cooks. What else do you need?
Exactly.
Oh, my gosh. Okay. Something on your bucket list.
Bucket list. Let's see. Yes, there's one on my list. I want to spend at least a week in Istanbul. And I want to do that because people I know who have traveled to Turkey say that the city and its architecture is just stupendous. And of course, it's part of the Middle East. My family is European. I know parts of Europe from previous travels. I've never been to the Middle East. I would just love to have a relaxed week looking at all the great sites, the great buildings in Istanbul.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. I've seen a lot of photos. So yeah, it does look magical. Okay. A food you could never give up.
Food I could never give up. Well, here it comes. It's a local favorite, and you can only really get it right here in New Mexico. Huevos rancheros.
Okay, because that's where they make the most authentic and best, or?
That's right. That wonderful red sauce you get at a restaurant when you order sort of southwestern eggs with tortillas and beans?
Yeah.
Well, in most parts of the world, that sauce is made with tomatoes, and it's good. It's red. But here in New Mexico, it's made with red chilies.
Ooh, now that's a kick.
And they are totally different. And the first time you've had a really good red chili sauce, authentic huevos rancheros, it's an experience like none other.
Okay. Well, again, when we're in Santa Fe,
right.
visiting St. John's and hiking.
We'll definitely have to try that out. Yeah, that sounds delicious, actually.
It does to me, too. I love spicy. Okay, how do you de-stress?
Oh, that's easy. I just run. I go for a long, long run.
Nice.
That same hiking trail is a good running trail, and I come home and I lie on the floor for half an hour and stretch, and it works wonders.
All right, perfect. I love that. Okay, last one. Are you a Mr. Fixit or a duct tape kind of guy?
Oh, I'm Mr. Fixit.
You are?
I've got a big toolkit, and I love to use tools. I love to work with my hands. The only regret I have is that life usually keeps me pretty busy during the day here, and then weekends, everything, there's always chores. It gets in the way. But if I had an extra couple of hours on the weekend, I'd be fixing everything, and I love it.
Well, geez, you're an all-around guy. Runner, singer, I don't know.
Hiker.
The list goes on. Hiker.
It definitely does.
Chef.
Yeah. I know. What's nothing lacking there? Well, listen, thank you so much, Charlie, for coming on today and sharing everything you did about St. John's College and the benefits of a liberal arts classical education. For anybody interested, you should check it out. But thanks so much for coming on.
Well, thank you, Bobby and Meg. It's been a great pleasure, and I appreciate so much the chance to speak with you and to share a few thoughts about St. John's College and what a liberal arts college and its education can mean for young people.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Charlie. We learned a lot today, and I'm sure our listeners did too. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye-bye.
Wow, that was an amazing interview with Charlie. I really learned a lot about his small school and how powerful it is for its size, especially.
Definitely. And didn't he make you want to visit Santa Fe?
Oh, absolutely. I'm heading out there now. My flights are booked.
That's right. But I really think it's a wonderful and interesting college option for students out there. So something to look into.
Yeah, I really would love to do that. Sit down and read those books and discuss them with a group of people. I would love to do that, maybe.
I know. I feel like you would get so much out of it doing that. But anyway, listen, have a wonderful day, everyone. And don't forget to check us out on social media. We'll include all those links in the show notes. And please don't forget to subscribe.
Yes, please do subscribe, guys. Rate, review, do all that great stuff for us. We really appreciate it. And thank you all for listening.
We will include the link to St. John's College in the show notes. So if you want to check it out, head on over and check that out.
Check it out.
Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, have a great day.
And this has been an Academic and Career Advising Services production.